All right, Rich Hanna, thank you for joining us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So obviously, for people that watch the podcast, you know Jeet. Jeet's our chief strategy officer. Jeet and Rich know each other from way back when. So Rich has been a professor for many, many years. So we thought, let's get on, talk about some different things around pricing and do a discussion all together around what's happening and where things are heading. So it's great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And then Jeet, anything from your perspective about just things you want to cover with Rich, how you treat each other?
Yeah. So, Rich and I, like you said, we go way back. We started, I think we met in the SPG days of pricing back in the late 90s, early 2000s timeframe. So we've known each other for a little while, and I have a lot of respect for Rich, and he's obviously, he knows pricing, but he's gone into the world of marketing deeper as he's kind of formulated his education career. And I think it'll be a great conversation for us to have, which is to understand marketing and understand the evolution of marketing, not just today, but into the future with all these technological advancements that we're seeing and how it's going to affect consumerism and how we make decisions and the role pricing plays today and how it will evolve in the future. So I think it'll be a fun conversation to have, and Rich is always funny, so it should be a lot of fun.
Excellent.
I try to bring the humor when I can.
Yeah. We appreciate that.
Oh, Boston.
That's right. So, Rich, can you tell us a bit? So, your title, this is Professor of Practice at Babson College. So, can you tell us a bit about your focus areas?
Sure. So I've been at Babson now for about 10 years. Like you said, I've been teaching for about 20. But prior to teaching, I worked in B2B sales for about 5 or 6 years. And then, like Jeet mentioned, we met. I was actually doing my dissertation. When we met, I was doing part-time work at SPG because Reed Holden was actually on my dissertation committee. And so, but for the last, for seems like ages now, I've been working in the digital marketing space, and that's what I teach at Babson. I teach digital marketing, and I teach another course on social media strategy. And then I'm also teaching a course or building a course and taught it as an experimental on growth marketing analytics and looking at opportunities to find where can you tweak your marketing funnel and how do you create experiments to test that and be more efficient and better at conversion. And so digital marketing has really become quintessential to any business training these days. And I'm teaching that course probably the most just because it's fundamental to so many different programs we have at Babson. Thinking about the full funnel of how do we engage with customers from the beginning all the way through, hopefully making them loyal ambassadors to our business.
Rich, I'm curious as if I think back to my career and starting off my first year of engineering school, we were learning C++, C, and then C++ was the upgrade, right? Yeah. There's no computers, basically. You have to go to the computer lab, from those days to marketing now with all the advancements in technology. Tell me a little bit about even when you started teaching and what you were teaching versus, how it's changed to what you're teaching now. It's got to be so different.
Well, it's funny. So when we met, and I was just getting into academia, this was back in 2001, 2002, I was close to graduating. In those days, that was, really at the sort of the boom and bust period of the internet. You think back, Google, and everybody comes around the late 90s, and then everybody is launching a website. There's every business, and then there was the bust, and all of a sudden there was all sorts of consolidation. And in those days in academia, nobody wanted you to teach e-commerce. If you were a pure academic, e-commerce was considered let's leave that to practice because this might be just another channel. Yeah. We're not going to really worry about it. Fast forward 10 years later, I don't think you can have a business program without talking about digital marketing and also infrastructure. How the back end, where's the data go and how do you manage that? So what was a nice to have now is an absolute must. And then funny, you learn C++, now it's all about Python. Python or write a SQL script, and people are using AI, in fact, to just do that. Like if you're not that comfortable, you can go to your AI and talk to ChatGPT and say, write me a script for the following. Of course, if you don't know how to do it, you won't be able to check it very well.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, that is the thing today is essentially how do I connect all my different data sources or different parts of the digital business. And a lot of it depends on some of these newer languages.
It's interesting that you brought up ChatGPT because I heard this the CEO of NVIDIA speak because obviously he is one of the companies that are in the forefront of this evolution that's upon us. And one of the things that he talked about, which I thought was very eloquently said, was you don't need to go to school to learn how to be a coder anymore. You can have natural language and you can use your natural language to have AI tools code for you. So you can be very outcome based and you could be a marketer, you can be a pure marketer. You don't need a coding background. That's where we're headed to be able to say, hey, I want my website to do ABC. I want my data integration to look like ABC. I want this or that and be very language oriented. And the AI engine will take care of all the things that you need from a coding perspective in the background and be able to make it themselves secure. Right. Eventually, I mean, obviously, we're at the early stages, but I can only imagine what that would mean for how we set up marketing as a business in the future and what we do to keep ourselves sort of on the forefront of consumers and how consumers will use that to make decisions. Right.
It's a little scary, having grown up watching Terminator and the Skynet, we're seeing Skynet come along, and being built in front of us.
Right.
So a lot of right now, I think there's, the whole no code movement. There's a lot of things that depend on people writing and creating modules that you can use that fit your particular purpose. And I see that a lot with the web platforms like Wix and WordPress, that you pick a module that fits your business need, and then you can modify it, but you don't need coding to do it. At some point, when it's not a human that creates those modules and it's AI, again, it's interesting because now we don't need to know how to do things. What does scare me a little bit about that, and is that at some point we will forget to know how to do things, like all things, and what happens when the computer breaks, which is a great sci-fi question. You become so dependent on the AI, but then what happens if it breaks? Like a week ago in the Northeast, we had the cell phones all went down, and it was solar. So when technology fails, we don't have landlines anymore to get in touch with each other. So what are we doing?
Sure.
Yes, I agree with you. We are moving in that direction where, and it is great because it opens up avenues for people to do things that they couldn't do before because they lacked a technical ability. So I do think that's a fantastic thing, and it opens up for greater creativity and greater opportunity. But there's a little bit of me that's a little scared. Like I'd like somebody to know what they're doing.
I think we should all be a little scared for sure.
Right.
What do you think? I'm curious as to the consumerism portion of it, right? As a consumer, obviously, it's no longer just businesses that can use AI to target consumers, but now as a consumer, you have choices and you can use AI or any other tool sets to be able to make choices differently than you did before. And I'm curious to see or hear your point of view on what that world may look like in the future from a consumer's perspective.
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and everybody, especially in digital marketing, and if you're Google in particular, probably, but people are worried about what will AI do to search. The beauty of AI is you ask it in a question, so it's a natural language. When we use search engines now, you have to think about keywords, and you're thinking about what I'm looking for in a set of keywords, but not necessarily a question, because the search engine doesn't necessarily understand what your question is, and it's trying to match according to those keywords. What right now, if you asked AI to do an equivalent search as you might do in keywords looking for a product or service, it's limited by what data it has access to. And so it's not great right now.
Sure.
But it could be awesome because once you pose a question, like if you said, I want to go on a vacation. Right now, you might go to a TripAdvisor or an Expedia to get ideas of what you could do, but you'll be able to type in exactly what you want to do. And now the AI will be able to scrape the internet and find and make recommendations of a complete trip. And if we talk about totally replacing the travel agent, I mean, we're getting closer to that outside of booking your tickets and things like that. So I think there's a lot of really cool opportunity. The key, though, is that AI is only as good as the data it's given. And so, much like one of the problems I think we have in social media, where we become siloed to the content that we like or that the algorithms decide is good for us, the data we'll get from AI is only as good as the data we plug into the original AI model. So there could be limitations of what customers actually learn about because it's either not accessible or companies don't know how to make it AI accessible.
Yeah. And there's a flip side, right? So if I'm a company, do I use that issue to my advantage by pushing something out there that will bias you one way or the other? Like if AI tools, I know right now, one of the problems that I see is it's biased based on the historical information that's available online. Well, the historical information could be biased against women. It could be biased against minorities. It could, because that's our history, right? Because we are using our history to really recommend something. So there's inherent biases in the papers we write and what we talk about, say, and the data we put out there. So there, it's using that to formulate an answer to the question that you have. So as a company in the future, do I flood the internet with some kind of information that will inherently bias a question that somebody's asking from a consumer point of view? Will that be part of a company's strategy to influence a purchase by a consumer?
And then to combine that with our inherent laziness as people to not research and
to double check the output.
so we're going to become over reliant on AI to make the decision: is this good or not? So do we? Much like in social media now, where the question is, can you filter what people see? So to what extent are we going into violating free speech and all this by saying, well, maybe certain content should not be made available, or that these social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and others need to actually do a job of going through and making sure that the content is real and true. And of course, nobody wants to do this, and it's very difficult. Same thing with AI. Can we teach AI to actually learn to filter out these biases? And the problem is that no one really knows how to describe a lot of these things or to really fully identify it, which makes filtering even more difficult. And again, how much do we want an artificial intelligence making decisions for us? I think that's always going to be the question.
Yeah.
But people would prefer ultimately if they could go to a tool and say, help me find the best option.
Yeah.
And then just make the decision for me. Or here's criteria. Tell me what's my best choice. And then move on. They want to be able to move on quickly to other things. And I think that's always going to be our challenge with all these digital tools and AI in particular is what are we teaching it to do?
When we were chatting right before starting the podcast, one of the things you talked about was consumers relying on these types of tools like AI to make that decision of choice of who they're going to go with, which I fundamentally, I think I'm with you and I agree. And I automatically went to, as a pricer, what does that mean for me to set a price for a product or service, to have the engine represent that price or that solution to a potential consumer, where now the decision-making cycle has shortened and the biggest influencer is the AI engine that this consumer is using, and no longer is it a industry article, or it's no longer their buddy or somebody who works in the field or anything like that. They're just asking a series of questions to an engine. They're getting the answer, they're evaluating it, and they're going with the choice the engine recommends, right? Yeah. It becomes a personal optimization engine almost, for their decision making. Pricing goes so much farther than just the number, right? We have to know there's the price, there's the value that's associated with that price, there's the how you position yourself. There's so many things. That's what leads us into marketing and all aspects of marketing and things like that. And it just is interesting to know that an engine like this will fundamentally present our price. So what are your thoughts on how companies can get ready to present their offer in a world where the decision cycle has shrunk because of AI?
Yeah, that's a very complex and interesting question. I see AI right now being used in pricing to help figure out what is the optimal price, and this is obviously reacting to consumer demand. and it's, estimating elasticities. And so there's a great opportunity in terms of pricing, especially if you're in dynamic pricing, to figure out what will the market bear, and how can I use AI to help me get the right price. But I think the reverse flip side of that is if you are a business that actually focuses on value, it's may become harder to communicate that because people will only see lowest price, or they'll be comparing based on what heuristic, what um, characteristics they type into ChatGPT or whatever AI they're using. So if I say, find me the best price, well, ChatGPT or AI is going to provide you the answer to your specific question. And so I think it's going to be a challenge for businesses to figure out, how do we convey the value we offer in addition to the price, so people don't simply become price shoppers and see a price compared to other prices, but also get some background on what's our ability to serve, how well have we satisfied our customers for the last several years. And so how does that get included in that conversation? And I do worry that where the customer might be very focused on one or two components of decision making, they have to want to know the other questions. Is this a valuable? How good are they at actually meeting customer demands? And if they don't ask those questions, then AI might turn everybody into a price shopper.
Which is that's an interesting statement by itself, right? Because if we play that out, if they're true, I believe price shoppers are, it's a unique DNA, and we pretend to be price shoppers when we're actually not. So if AI makes that population set increase in quantity, I'm wondering if there's a backlash that could possibly happen with them choosing the wrong solutions, and then there being a consequence of that, and then that sort of issue coming back around with the wrong product, wrong price, and coming back around to the right product, right price. Right?
Yeah, that's a great thought. So we hopefully learn we shouldn't, we should use different decision criteria because we got burned the last time we used one. And let's now incorporate that in our next search, that I'm looking for something different.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of it also is economics too. I mean, right now, where people are concerned about how they spend their money, it becomes more important to find the lowest price to meet certain needs. But if our economy becomes a little bit more friendlier to the money we make, so maybe we might ask different questions. I think really is a function of where we are and what our constraints are. So if I'm constrained by budget, then I have to be looking for the lowest price. But if I'm not constrained by budget, I might use other decision criteria in the process. Yeah. But if I'm continually burned by only shopping on price, so I would hope that people would. I need to ask a different question next time when I go to the account.
That's right. I'm also wondering. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like one of the things that I've gotten slowly, like more sophisticated with as I'm using these things, is telling the engine or telling GPT like how to listen or how to respond, think about the following things, or behave as this kind of person, or all those kind of specifications. And it's interesting because I think over time, to your point, people need to learn to get more sophisticated and evolve so that it's really working for us. And I guess the other thing for both of you is, how do you see businesses kind of from the other side guiding that, or how to intervene so that we don't all turn into price shoppers and then kind of climb our way out slowly over years or whatever, It's
a double-edged sword, because if you're in an open AI environment, whatever you're teaching and whatever you're sharing is being shared with everybody else.
Right.
Well, businesses have to be very careful of what they put into an open AI, because if it's truly the open AI, then that you are teaching you're teaching it to be better, but you're also putting your information out there for others to have access to.
You're making a deposit.
Exactly. Now, the flip side is a lot of businesses will have a closed sandbox where they can play and it's only information shared within the business. But then the downside of that is you're limited to what you've just put into it. And so ChatGPT may not come up with as great a solution, or all the different alternatives you should consider. because it only has access to only, your materials. And we see this, I see a big difference between the output that I get using AI in a sandbox closed environment compared to when I use open AI. And so you have to weigh the risk of what do I want to share with the world versus how much do I want to get a really good solution from this AI. And so I think businesses have to really think about how much are they putting out there versus how much do they, maybe limit what AI does for them, but keeps more of their IP in-house.
I agree with that comment, of course, but I'll add that I think
Comment?
the comment about what we put out there and when we put it out there, right? Of these companies, because we do have to understand fundamentally how others are going to use what we put out there, be it for good reasons or be it for bad reasons. We just have to understand that. But I think our from a company perspective, our sales funnel is fundamentally changing. And I think we have to accept where we put those resources within that funnel, because there is going to be at the top of the funnel people that make decisions off of just asking this engine. Just like on the web, when the internet came out and people were just Googling and making decisions just off of the Google answers, I think it's the same thing. And I think what it's going to force, in my opinion, companies to do is put resources in different stages of the funnel and make their products and solutions easier to try and use, and then make it easier to switch from another product or service over to theirs. We have to have those pieces in there, because I think it will cause, to Rich's point, I think it does slow that decision buyer's journey out. So because it's closer and tighter, there's going to be higher revolutions of it. And because there's going to be higher revolutions, as a company, you cannot think of yourself as being a heavy ERP type of thing. You have to think of yourself as small, nimble. You're going to have churn. You're going to drop customers. You're going to get customers. It's going to happen in this in entry part of this AI revolution. And you have to be comfortable with it. And you almost have to set up your company to be able to do it. And then I think things will start calming down when we start figuring some of these things out better over the next 10 years or so. And then your funnel is going to start changing again, and you'll have to reallocate where you put your resources at that point. I think we are going to go through that evolution.
I agree. I mean, I think we also see it with where do people get their information now?
Yeah.
Or the more we move towards streaming television, where we can pay additional fees to avoid advertising, and the more, to some extent, that we become almost closing our eyes to the ads that are interplaced in our social media algorithms, we're going to look at how do people get information very differently. And already people tend to rely more on influencers and sort of word of mouth and trends than marketing information that might be coming from the business. And so I agree. We have to, as businesses, have to think about where are we allocating our dollars to get that top of the funnel. Where are we going to put our money in? And to your point, it may be more important to worry about where are we putting our money in the middle of the funnel. Once a person is aware of us, how are we making ourselves stand out so that they convert with us as opposed to visiting somebody else?
Yeah, I agree.
You made me think of this, Jeet, just in talking about how enterprises need to be more nimble as it relates to your research around dynamic value drivers. Like, how do you see that playing out with AI, with how you're talking about the funnel? This is a good one to get Rich's take on, is like, where is this going and how do you see this kind of play out?
Yeah, I think, I talked to Rich a little bit before about, our concepts of pricing power and how we're going to go to market. I think the technology has always done this to us, which is it shortens cycles, right? Even when Intel came out with the processors and the speeds and how fast we can do calculations, it just shortens our time. Everything is about shortening that time. So if companies if we don't react to that, we're going to be left behind. Let's say Google is one of the largest, Alphabet is one of the largest companies out there, and we're thinking to ourselves, there'll never be another company as big as that. NVIDIA just hit 2 trillion valuation, right? Market valuation. You've got companies that are growing in exponential size and speed, and we think it can never be reached, but it's happening twice as fast, 3 times as fast, and 6 times as fast, and 8 times as fast. Therefore, we have to be accepting of that and understand, how do we play to that? How do we build ourselves to that type of a world. So dynamic value drivers for us is understanding what those needs of this consumer is as they themselves are trying to figure it out. So we can't assume that we will know what value drivers are going to make the decision for them tomorrow. They think they know, we think we know, but it's always evolving and changing. So as a pricer for myself and as we are advising our clients, I think it's so important to understand the market at shorter timeframes and intervals, because the market is changing at a much more rapid manner because of these new technologies that are coming in. Frankly, because also social media has forced us to have shorter attention spans. All of these things are making this market extremely dynamic, which means we can't just have a 3-month pricing project and then say my pricing will be fine or my understanding of my consumer is going to be okay for the next 12 months. I don't think that's there anymore. I think you need to understand your customer for this month. Next month, it could be totally different. Obviously, your verticals make a big difference in my comment here, but I think time is what is critical in our market today, and we have to build to that.
I agree with you 100%. But the one thing I think is maybe reassuring is that the one thing that hasn't changed is we still need to focus on the customer.
That's right. That's a great point. Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we do now that won't change, but I think the key is that the timing. You just have to do it more frequently. The shelf life is going to be a lot shorter on customer needs. And truth is, a lot of things are built for shorter shelf lives anyways, but we need to recognize that a customer need is going to change more rapidly. And if the ability to switch is easier, then that's going to require companies to be that much more nimble to respond so they don't switch. But I think that's what we're seeing is you have more of these businesses that enter the market, switching costs go down, and if someone can break the code to be an alternative to your business, and the person's needs change, they easily will jump. But if we can show that value, by showing value, we have to recognize what our customer needs are and stay on top of it more frequently, as you're pointing out. That's a big thing, and not everybody's equipped to either monitor the customer or to maybe even to want to stay on the customer as frequently as you may need to.
Yeah.
What do you think are the biggest gaps and pitfalls in that part in terms of ongoing monitoring, understanding the customer needs changing? What are the things that you see as the biggest issues?
I think it's going to be ultimately access to that information. So how do we determine that, especially as privacy issues keep on being raised and potentially companies' abilities to track information or track their customers might change over time? I think the biggest hurdle is going to be privacy. And what does a customer allow you to know about them? And what can we figure out from the tracking process?
I think
we know about our customers, but we may have a difficult time finding that information.
Right.
I think to add to what he's saying, you usually have a supply chain, right? People don't understand that, if you look at retailers, they're not the only company involved in bringing that product to the consumer. So it's great that you know and understand your consumers, but that's just one portion of the entire supply chain. There's probably 15 to 20 companies that makes that shirt that you're going to wear from that retailer at that point, right? But there's all these other companies, and they're all sort of dependent on that consumer and how that consumer makes that decision. So I think to be able to understand the consumer and to Rich's point, that personal data and how do you get it and how do you safely get it and protect it and then use it throughout that channel to make that channel optimal in order to save costs and not have too much friction in that channel, to be able to put that shirt at the right time at the right place with the right price for the right customer is going to be critical to have that orchestration in place. And that, I think, is going to be critical. And I think technology will help you do that piece of it. But you really need to understand that market and that customer, to Rich's point before, and that will be critical.
On that line, one thing that does concern me is how do businesses stand out now, or even small brands? Because once you go onto Amazon or now Temu, you see, or even Wayfair, I'll see the same product offered with 5 different brand names on it. how do I know who's the original or who's the one I can trust? Or are they all manufactured by the same place, but it's just a label that's being slapped on it, and they may be a slightly different price? And will AI help me discern that? But I think that's a real challenge right now for a lot of people. Consumption is, especially this more so in retail. I don't think it's the same in B2B, but more in consumer retail is, how do I distinguish between all of these similar or identical products with just different brand names?
I think.
And technology is actually, I think, making it more complicated. And I wonder whether finding out who's the actual manufacturer. If I could ask AI, well, who makes the product for these 5 brands? And if AI would tell me, now it's a matter of, all right, so how do I pick which one?
These phones now, we have that ability to circle like a couch, and it'll tell me, the cheapest place to get that same exact couch, right? So I do think it will help from a positive spin perspective. It will help us eliminate companies that truly don't add value. If you're a company that's in there because of arbitrage and you're just taking advantage of an arbitrage, a cost arbitrage that's there, and you're not adding fundamentally any value to the chain and to the consumer, I think your days are limited. I think those days are numbered. And I think there are a lot of those companies, because of the internet boom, those companies did get formed. And I think you're going to see a lot of expiration of those companies.
That'll be interesting to see.
I think that's our episode. I really appreciate you joining us, Rich. It's a lot of different things to think about, a lot of the bigger picture, kind of where we're heading. And I appreciate you coming with us on this.
I've had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.